this week we're starting our new series, like deep diving into these sensations. And so I was just thinking on the drive here about, in order to even notice anything, right, we have to cultivate awareness. And it's such an interesting, if you want to, like, we all know, like, right, to be aware of something, like, you kind of know about it or whatever, but maybe you've experienced, oh, look, here we're trying, like, maybe you've experienced this before, like, if you're an artist or photographer or, or even like a botanist, anything where you have given something like a little extra attention, right? Like beyond the average amount of like glancing, and I'm like, that's a plant, that's a painting, there's the label, but like not really going deeper. And I have a few examples of, I think, that are interesting. And the first thing is to just like maybe help get everyone on board. And if you've never done this before, you should give it a try. But if you've taken any kind of art class and you've tried to draw a still life, right, or replicate a drawing, like what you're seeing, you realize like how much is really missed in at the first glance. Like you really get to be intimate with something when you try to draw it as it is. Like you see the proportions, you realize how many more colors are really there, like it's you become super aware, right? And then so another example that I have, there's another look, I think we've looked out enough. Another example I have is back in the day before, because I'm sort of like in the plant world, botanist, I've grown them, worked in that industry. But to begin with, and I worked with a lot of volunteers and people with plants, first of all, that it's a huge, like there's just so many different kinds of genuses and species, and it's beyond, and they're still finding new plants, and so it's a huge thing. And each one, like there may be just a tiny little specific thing that makes one different, almost that you might almost need a microscope for, right? But if you've never really worked with plants before, and you're like, oh, I want to get into this, you might just be like, there's a tree, there's a shrub, a little bit more of a, and this isn't saying anything bad, but, like a childlike perspective on plants, because we have just not given them any more awareness, because, it's not really, we kind of know now what's poisonous or not. I think, it's interesting who pays it. Ranchers know a lot about plants because of their cattle and grasses and things, but for the most part, it's not, you don't really have to know a lot about plants. It's not, so you would have to have the desire and then cultivate the awareness. But in my working with plants, right, and then my first sort of like shift in perspective was, and then this could shift so many perspectives for you, but I'm not saying go do hallucinogens or whatever, but doing mushrooms really, before there's these plants, and then they took on a vibrance after dabbling with some hallucinogens that I never really lost. So that started sort of like this more of an awareness. I'm like, well, these are alive, these are beings, and so then and then I got into the plant world, and then the more you look, the more you see, and that's so true on so many different levels here. And so that's kind of what I want you to take as we move into this new course is, you may know, right, what your senses are or whatever, but like we want to be looking closer. We're taking a deep dive here. We're expanding our awareness, which can grow. Like just because you have a baseline doesn't mean that you can't learn more. You can't cultivate more awareness around you, around your senses, what's going on. So, and you could take this ideology into many, like if you want to learn more about something, you pay more attention to it, you deepen your focus on it, and then, it opens for you. The more you see, and then the more, the things become obvious that were once hidden. And so this was really interesting. So I want you to think about that. Maybe think about how you could relate to what I'm talking about here. Is there any like artistic, anything that you've paid extra attention to that on first glance or when you first started you didn't really realize like how much you were missing, how much you didn't see until you really learned. Okay.